Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Everybody, thanks for listening to the podcast. Today's episode will have no ads because it's very important and it took me a long time to connect with today's guest. She is a true victim of MKUltra, not the MKUltra that you kind of hear PBS or other people talk about, the real MKUltra, and it's a very intense episode. That being said, I'm going to put out a trigger warning. Okay, there's a couple of things that are said in here that might get you upset, and this is all I ask, is if something upsets you, please continue to listen because there's a couple of things where I double back and we clarify. Okay. The point of this podcast has never been to offend anyone or it is to inform. And also I do sort of let my guests say whatever they will. I've had some podcasts taken down because of that, but I think I always do a good job of if something is where I hear in my head, ooh, that's going to get a trigger. I always go back and try and clarify. And I think we did that very well on this episode. So know if you hear something that might set you off, just continue to listen. Also, if it doesn't help how I doubled back, you're always welcome to email me. Anyone that's emailed me knows I answer all my emails and I read them. So maybe you have a different perspective and you can teach me something, or maybe we can talk about it on another podcast. I just want you to know I really appreciate everyone that's listening. So please have an open mind and enjoy today's podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Karen. I'm so excited about my guest today. We're not even doing ads. We're just going to go straight through and so much to learn here. I first heard my guest on the Higher Side Chats, which if you're not listening, that's the best podcast. I can't say enough good things about it. This guy does the greatest intro ever, which means he's the exact opposite of me. I'm kind of, I'm a hacky and I jump right in with what I have. But I heard Elisa E on his podcast, and her book is called Our Life Beyond MKUltra Then and Now. And it blew me away. I sent it to everyone. I've been obsessed with mind control for a while. And I was so lucky to find you and get you on the show. So thank you for coming on, first of all.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate the invite.
Your story is not only amazing. I'm going to try and start out. My listeners know I'm dyslexic. I don't read. I loved your book. I read your book and I started to make notes in it about things to ask you. And then I was just writing all over the whole book. So I was like, we're going to wing it and we're just going to see where it goes. Now, so I was looking for a great way to explain MKUltra to people because a lot of people don't know. And I feel like it's represented differently on TV. So we want to tell people and just step in anywhere. It was a CIA project, the most secret project ever of mind control. And when you watch shows about it, they make it sound like, yeah, a guy went to a prostitute and then they gave him LSD, or somebody came in for asthma and then they gave him the wrong medication to test his mind. But it's way bigger than that. I mean, it's been your life, hasn't it?
It has. And you're absolutely correct. MKUltra is the old term, but we still use it to, signify what we're talking about, but it's changed names repeatedly. I believe it's been handed off, not only run by intelligence, military people, but it's very corporate now. With military contractors, as we get into directed energy weapons. So it has morphed. It has grown. It hasn't decreased. It has grown into a global monster, truly. I was born in the 60s, so my version was what we call trauma-based mind control. And it's designed to split the personality into many different alters. They call them clean slates. So they'll do a torture session, basically, and split you off. It's a very primal reaction to split. It's not something you think about whether you should or shouldn't. Your mind splits under enough pressure. And then they have all these clean slates. For example, they may torture you and create 10 slates, and they may only pick the first two because they're the strongest to program them. And that programming comes later usually. And then they just sequester them away and, pull them up and program them. And then they're able to pull them up and use them, which creates multiple personality disorder, so that you have all these personalities that are sequestered from one another. There's amnesic walls that block them off. So a person under MPD, they call it DID now. I think they're trying to make it sound a little better. But under MPD will lose time. They'll be living their life, but there will be these big gaps of time where an alter has taken over. But the front personality won't know what's going on. There may be symptoms, but if you don't have the information, like I didn't have the language, I didn't understand mind control, or, I just had these horrific memories that started breaking through kind of throughout my life. But as I got older and headed into my 30s, that's when it really started breaking down.
Wow. And also, like you said, this started when you had memories in your book from when you were an infant. So you were and didn't you say your father was also?
My father, he was definitely multiple. I believe that my whole family was targeted because, you can't really just take one person and have a healthy family around them. Somebody's going to notice, things are going to go awry. I believe my whole family was targeted, but I was the focus of the time and money put in.
Wow. Okay. So, and in the book, you go over this, just, it's really fascinating, and it's horrible. And it's, just seeing you now, I'm like, wow, this is fantastic that you're here. 'Cause I don't think I would have been that strong. And a weird side note for the publisher, when I got the book, it smells great. I don't know. I don't know if he was burning incense around or something.
Probably. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. They're an awesome couple. They really are. And they're really publishing some important material and some good material. Matter of fact, I'm just going to do a quick plug. They're coming out with a book on George Floyd, the whole episode that started. Yeah. There's a woman that wrote a book, so they'll be publishing that. So look for it. Oh,
that's great. They publish sort of things maybe other people won't talk about, right?
Yeah, a lot of us wind up self-publishing. We don't always have people that want to publish us. So we wind up going on KDP and doing it ourselves. I know a lot of people who have done that.
Okay. So I'm going to sort of make a leap, because you're also in a movie called 50 Voices.
Right.
Which we'll have that link in the, at least to the trailer in there. This is coming out in 2024. So hopefully it's up and running. That is just about
It's out.
Oh, it's out now. Okay.
What they're doing is they're releasing several testimonies together at a time, and then they wait and then they release more. So it's really smart. They're creating it in a way that it can't be wiped off. It can't just disappear. So, several testimonies come out. There's 50 voices it's called 50 Voices of Ritual Abuse.
Wow.
And yeah.
Okay. This is with the alters and the multiple personalities, up until about 30, before everything started to kind of break through. Were you having a normal life? Were you working a job, or was it just all over the place?
I worked many jobs, and people that I worked for always wanted to promote me. I had an alter. I call her the perfect employee. And sometimes I would come to at work. Like, I would realize I'm at work and I've been at work for an hour or two. So that started happening in deep programming where I could see it. I had jobs. I was being used during the night. It's amazing what the body and mind can put up with for an extended period of time. But then it's a protection mechanism, really, to create these alters, and you're trying to survive, but it works against you in the long run. I was on 24/7 adrenaline push. I was missing time, tremendous amount of time. As a matter of fact, when I got into deep programming, the better part of a decade was just a few memories, So yeah, you have two lives is really what you're doing. You're leading two different lives.
And both of them might be running fine. You're just not really aware of one, right? Like you said, at work, you were great.
Exactly. And when I started deep programming, something really interesting happened. There were these episodes where I was either in a programming session or a torture session, or I was out on task. I call it on task. And I would have a memory surface in deep programming where it was almost like my highest self came to and took in the surroundings. And then bam, she was gone. And there were a lot of these. And I believe that that's what was happening. There was a part of me that was recording for years later when I would start to wake up. But you don't know. You don't know. You know there's things wrong, tremendous things wrong. You can't relate to other people the way they're living. I remember so often as a young adult watching people and realizing I had no idea what was going on with them. And you're almost mimicking, because that's what I was doing. I couldn't connect with that. I was so dissociated, and literally my spirit and soul resided outside my body. That's what they do. So
just a strange question. Do you think there was anyone that sort of caught on or felt like, she's not really here, or do you think there was anyone, or was it that smooth?
Oh no, there were so many strange things in my family, but you didn't talk about it. You didn't do anything. There was a lot of, there was domestic abuse. It was a highly dysfunctional family. There was incest with my father and one of my brothers. So nobody wanted to face things. And for example, I remember this episode as a teenager. My brother and I were in the room and we were beginning together. And I remember my mom calling out from across the house as she slowly walked. So in other words, everybody was protecting themselves. She didn't want to confront this. She wanted to let us know she was on her way so that she wouldn't have to see or witness anything. And that's how, bless her heart, she's a victim too. But that's how dysfunctional families, highly dysfunctional families work. Everybody's just trying to survive.
Yeah. And, I always, I think about my mom who couldn't leave my dad when she wanted to, just because of even the time that they were living in. So it comes to be around 30, and now the walls start to come down, and that which is foggy, it's now memories instead of like, oh, that did happen. Is that how it started to, you were like, oh, wait, I remember that. Wait, what was it kind of like that?
Yeah. And it's like an assault. You're driving down the road and something hits you and what is that? And of course, like I said, I didn't have the language. I didn't know what this really was. So I couldn't imagine how I could be, for example, on a military base being tortured. And nobody seems to care. And why would I be there? And they're not, and I even knew they're not trying to kill me, but they might. There was enough, but I couldn't make sense of any of it. So, and there was a lot of cover screen memories, so-called alien abduction, that kind of stuff. So those things confuse the issue even more, so when it really started to break down, I was going to places that didn't actually have the answer, but it was the only thing I knew to do. There was no place to go. You don't go to law enforcement because they're in some of your memories. You just don't trust anything or anyone. And you've been also programmed to not trust anyone or anything. So, I remember driving to a UFO conference because of the alien type memories that involved military. So I already knew that this was not just an alien so-called issue. There were military in these memories, human beings. And my alters were saying as I'm driving to it, don't do this. You're outing us. Like it was so dangerous for them that they figured we'd be killed. And I remember the feeling was, a friend of mine said, on one example when I went to get help, which would be the place where I actually, it all broke open. That was at 46. I was going to meet some men, and she said, "This is too dangerous. You know, this guy that you met at the conference is a handler." And my feeling was, yeah, but I'm going to die anyway. You know, what is it? Why not take a chance on people who have information? I don't have the information. And that was the feeling that I lived with, was, even though I didn't understand what was happening, that I'm going to die any minute. You know, every day was like, you're going to die. And it's like, well, why do you think you're going to die? I don't know, but I'm going to die. You know, so yeah. Anyway.
It's interesting too, when you were saying with the ETs, they don't want to kill you, but they might, which it was exactly, I don't know if you know the story of Travis Walton, but he was like, you know, he's like, I don't think they're being mean. They're just being, this is what they do. And
I want to interject, if I can there. I would like to interject that when you read my book, you'll understand that the beings, the so-called ETs that I was involved with, were demonic. They're not in a full physical form, the way, not my interaction. They're actually a manifestation of what I would call elementals that can cross in and out of physical reality. But all the ones I dealt with were malevolent. They were part of the programming. They weren't there to help humanity or any of that. They're truly demonic.
And that's a whole thing that I want to jump on in a second, because I'm also with you. I'm not the Stephen Greer love. I'm not about, and that seems to be. And when I heard you say that on the other podcast, I was like, oh, thank God it's not just me.
No.
Yes. So for you, so you find, explain to everyone how you find this deprogrammer, or explain to everybody how you found this person and what they did and how they were, because I would say, you know, if you were just a therapist or something like that, you have to say, well, wait a minute, is all this true or not? And then get involved. And that's also an ethical thing on their part. But how did you actually find this person?
Well, it is a long story, and I'll try to, and it's very detailed in the book, I believe book 2, which this is actually 2 books in one now, with a lot of updates and so forth. I went to a UFO conference to get help. I worked it because I couldn't afford it. I was astrally pulled for programming and use that very first night before the conference even started. At the end of the conference, I worked the registration desk. At the end of the conference, a man showed up, and there was an instant hook. He had information, I could tell. And he was a potential handler. I had had several come in already. And I don't believe I fell for any of them.
And handlers were the people that would activate the altar or have you do things or stuff. Correct.
So They would generally, when someone like me who has this type of programming, when you start sincerely waking up and seeking help, they'll send in potential handlers. And they'll try to get you hooked on one, which always winds up as a sexual relationship. So as far as I know, in my front self, I never bought that part. But I went with him up to Salt Lake City. He introduced me to 2 men, one of whom I was programmed to harm him and his family. That never took place, thank goodness, because of where I was and because of the spirit that he is. But he engaged me. We had many meetings with these 2 men, and I basically sat down and talked for 2 days and just told them, let me just talk. You know, you're going to either tell me you know something about this, or you're going to tell me I'm crazy, and just go home and do the best you can, you know. And when I was done, basically I remember he leaned in and he said, not only do we believe you, we've worked with people like you. And literally, I get goosebumps still. The floodgates opened. It was like all of a sudden, all these altars that were scared, that wanted out, saw that someone was sincerely listening and was going to be able to in some way help. I do want to qualify. I do not believe in deprogrammers. I believe that deprogrammers are possibly very suspect. You know, it's a very complicated system. that they put into people, sometimes more than one system. It's convoluted, it's deep, it's an esoteric science that it's incredible. So for someone on the outside to try to deprogram you, no, these guys had simply worked with others. They were able to show me material that it was real. The one man wound up for a good year and a half being a support person. I could call and just download all this stuff and he'd listen to it, that kind of thing. But no, I self-deprogrammed. And it's not that that's easy, and it's not necessarily even safe, because what happens is they install a lot of self-destruct, even suicide programs. And in deep deprogramming, I'd get up some days and I'd have 5 programs go off, and you just basically are, hanging on until, and praying a lot until you can start to understand. And I had to gain the trust. The way I kind of generally summarize it is I had to gain the trust of my alters, so that they would start revealing to me, and I could write. I wrote everything down. I had drawings, notebooks and notebooks and journals. It would cover, along the whole wall of one room. I just put it all down because the one man said, don't censor anything. It doesn't have to make sense. Just do it. And I do put that whole process in the book as well. Eventually, over some time, over several months, I would start to see how things would link up. It seemed like a bunch of fragmented memories, which it was, but over time, this memory had something to do with this. This altar reminds me of this altar. And I was able to start kind of naming them and quantifying and qualifying them as, this person or that. So those guys were absolute lifesaver. And the one that stayed with me long distance, for a long time, he would just encourage me to hang on. He says, you don't have to trust it. Just trust that I know it'll work. You just have to give it time, because a lot of programs were going off and I wanted to follow, some of those self-destruct programs. I had no idea what I was in for. And what will happen is the programming is set up in such a way that when you start to remember things, often they'll flood you with memories. And it took me a long time to be willing to listen to some of my alters. I just had to keep them at bay because I couldn't handle what they had been involved in. And then the farther in I went, the deeper the memories were, the more it's really, in my opinion, they layer in the programming. And after about a year, I realized they layer in the way deprogramming happens. So they control both aspects of what will surface first, may not be quite as important as, for example, when we get to the kill altars, that kind of thing, so they can let a lot of child fragment sex altars come up, and it makes me sound kind of whacked out and crazy. Even though it's important what those altars also had. But the deeper I went, the more nefarious it got. And I realized they didn't want that. They wanted me to take myself out before I got to that.
So, yeah. And so really they're lining up people to kind of do the work they don't want to do or stuff. That's kind of what MK Ultra really was, wasn't it?
Well, and, you can have a so-called agent that you train, but they have all the information. So if someone catches an agent and tortures them, they're going to get the information. But if you have a multiple and you put her out there in an altar, she can't access the information. They can kill her and she still can't access it, or he can't access it. So it was, in their minds, I believe it was a way to totally protect themselves.
Wow. In the first part of the book too, where you're really talking about the abuse and the torture, it almost like I was like, okay, then I get how this happened. It makes exact sense how this would happen and how you could do this to a person. And at one point in there, you said, you believe that Bill Clinton was also was a victim of MK Ultra. Is that true? Did I read that right?
Yeah, I do. There's been some footage that was released on YouTube. I don't know if it's still out there, but I'm looking at a guy, they're putting makeup on him, and this is a guy in total trance. So I believe a lot of figures that people would recognize are definitely mind controlled. I've seen repeated footage over the years, over the last decade, of these so-called famous people going into trance while they're being filmed, doing something so odd that I would recognize it as, yeah. And I watched a clip with Matt Lauer, and it must have been, I don't know if it was Katie Couric or another woman. They were at I don't know what it was, a New Year's celebration or something in New York City. And I forget the victim, I'll call him his name, but it was so fascinating. It was on YouTube because Matt Lauer mentioned a song I was programmed to, for one of the men, the one I went up and met in Salt Lake City. That song in particular was used to program me for that. He mentions it on this show, and the third guy, the victim, turns and looks at the camera and just goes into complete trance. And these two are talking, and he's locked on the camera, wide-eyed, frozen. And it was the same song. And I thought, oh my God, did his programmer use that song as well? But it was very clear that this person, who has had a long career in newscasting, was a complete MKUltra. I found people, I won't even name them all, but some of the even so-called heroes in our community of decades old, are programmed. The ones that were sent to bring information forward, or I call it containment, which is they release information, they deem as safe information before anybody else releases it. And then they can control the narrative. So it's stunning how many people are under mind control. And when you understand directed energy weapons, and remote technologies for mind control, which is the thing now, it is the thing. There's probably still trauma-based mind control for sure going on, satanic ritual abuse for sure going on, because I think these beings that are inhabiting these humans get off on it. But the remote technologies are now the thing that everybody needs to start understanding.
Yeah.
It's gone global.
Yeah. On TikTok, they call it a glitch. They go, why is so-and-so glitching? And they've caught a lot of them. And it really is, it's kind of like undeniable now. Like, I know people can do a lot with video, but there's a lot of stuff, and it seems like it just either exploded, or it's coming out now, or everybody's getting triggered or something. There's something about it right now. And you probably know, it's kind of interesting. I feel like you must be super psychic at the same time, because you're literally answering my questions before I ask them. But there's some sort of shift now that is just crazy. I want to go back to the ETs and the egregors and elementals that are sort of, because even people, I think people don't understand that when we talk about demonic stuff, it's not always like one being that is at you. It's an energy that these people are all connected to or tapped into. Can you tell us what you know about that?
Yeah. Egregores, you mentioned, those are thought forms that can be produced between just two people, but they can be produced on a much larger scale. Communities, states, nations. And once an egregore is formed, and we're talking about a very negative energy, once it's formed, it will do anything it can to survive. So it will start to control those folks, because it wants to stay alive. It doesn't want somebody to break free of that thought form or that behavior. So, yeah.
Does that fit in? It's like I just did a story on archons, which were the 7 that they can't manifest. So they want us to manifest for them. So they make a movie about a virus and everybody has to lock down. And then 10 years later, everybody's like, oh, the Simpsons knew. And it's that they didn't know. It's that idea was put there, whether you want to say by the archons or whomever. Is that's sort of the same idea, isn't it?
Well, predictive programming is a big part of our society where, I look at things as far as a global society, because it is global now. I look at it as far as indoctrination and conditioning. I want to state here that we as a society are not yet under mind control. We are under severe conditioning and indoctrination. And indoctrination is to alleviate any resistance over a period of time. So you start presenting ideas that would normally be horrific, but with time, people just become immune to it. And they form that cognitive dissonance where they don't see it as something important or something. Oh yeah, I've seen that in movies. It's no big deal. Well, it's changing your way of perceiving the world and what's right and what's wrong. And we can see that big time right now. And like the pedophilia movement, the transgender movement, these are all part of the transhumanist agenda, which is on its way. It's on its way. So I like to see that because right now you still have a choice, but that's not going to last. And the way my altar presented it at the beginning of deep programming, literally she wouldn't stop proclaiming this is, I'm a microcosm of the macrocosm. They're coming for all of you. And here's how she said it was going to happen. She said, you're going to get up one day and just continue what you normally do, but you're not even going to know that you lost your free will and choice. So it's not going to be a way where, necessarily they have to throw you in a FEMA camp. I mean, that stuff may happen, but they're working for the mind. And so there's a lot of things out there that the right hand is saying, look over here. And while the left hand is doing this. And it's my take that this is a slow boiling of frogs. This is a very slow process, not necessarily slow, but incremental process. And I'll share this just to give an idea of how this works. There's a man named Matt Landman, really great guy, very involved in the chemtrails, the 5G, the mind control stuff. As far as technology, he started an EMF clothing company. I don't know when, but, and he tells the story of how he makes these cell phone bags. He is currently my understanding is within a few years or a handful of years, he's currently on his 8th generation of cell phone bag, meaning the first one worked, then it stopped working. Second one worked, then it stopped working. We are now up to number 8. And this is just so you see how it's not so much about throwing a switch or locking everybody up, though those things they have plans for those things too if they need them. But it's more about this slow incremental progression, amping up the frequencies, 8 bags. That says that they've been slowly turning it up. What happened in China at the beginning of the last few years, that to me was they threw the switch, and it wasn't good. Okay, what happened to the people there when they threw the switch? Now they know just it's an incremental increase, and that's the mentality of those behind the transhumanists, which is the ultimate mind control global agenda, meaning transhumanism is they want to control everything. They want to control the environment, what we once called nature. They want to turn it into machine. They want to turn the earth into machine. They've already started. They need to control everything in our environment and us. And then they want to go out and do it in the solar system as well. So this is a full on control system. What they started with people like me is been taken now, in my opinion, based on something I call end time programming. And it's not end times of religion. It's a very different version of what end time programming is. I saw that kick into gear for the global scale a few years ago, when what happened a few years ago showed up. I knew that we had now kicked off end time programming, which is basically taking mind control to a global scale.
And, it's interesting about I will actually take your friend's information. I've been talking about 5G for years, and people don't even realize they're making 6G.
Right.
And
7.
And 7. Yeah. And France pulled that iPhone 12. I don't know why they picked that one, but they pulled that one phone and said it was too much EMF. And I purchase a lot of that stuff, EMF blocking stuff and EMF blocking blankets. And that's good to know, because I didn't know that you have to upgrade all the time.
He's really has a lot of integrity. And what I heard him say was, on that 8th generation bag that works, if it stops working, he'll replace it. He's had to turn around and replace the stuff that people bought. So he has a lot of integrity. I think you can go online, but I think he said it's the one with the Velcro flap or some Velcro on it. That's the 8th generation bag.
Okay. I have one now, but when you say they, I know someone is saying, who's they? How would you describe it? Because I feel like they, you can go right down the line. BlackRock, the military industrial complex. I mean, that's good enough for me. And I know people would say, well, we talk about, everyone's they don't have meetings so that everyone knows what's going on. It's almost broken up. The information is broken up, but somebody knows what that is. Is their ultimate goal just to really have, almost like when you go back and watch some of the UFO stuff about, they think why the Anunnaki created us or something, is to make us slaves to work for them? Is that really the ultimate goal?
Yeah. They, but what I do is, it's not the people, it's the entities behind them. These entities have been around epoch after epoch after epoch. They've had the same goal all along. And I met some of these. They were part of my programming. I would meet them in the astral, and I would be programmed with them, or by them, I should say. They're very real. They're not like you and I in a physical body. Extremely intelligent, extremely clever, beyond anything the most clever person on earth thinks they understand. And they've been working against the good forces that want to see our divine evolution to go forward. So what we're really talking about here are, there's leaders of certain groups, these beings that are the main jefe, but then there's legions underneath. So that's what we're really looking at. Those things are taking possession of people. Now, I'm not condoning what the people are doing in any way, shape, or form. But what happens is perpetrators are born out of victimization. Sorry, but that's the way it was. It was for me, and it's the way it works. So a lot of these people have been born into multi-generational families that they start on them when they're kids. A lot of the people we see out there that people would name are MKUltras. They have been programmed to do exactly what they're doing. These are some very nefarious people involved in this, but behind that is their soul and spirit. There's no soul and spirit there. There's inhuman behavior. When you see inhuman behavior, there's a reason we call it inhuman. It's not human anymore. They can do these things, and things you probably would never want to hear about, that a lot of us in mind control have witnessed. They can do these things because they are literally possessed. They are being run by these nihilistic entities. And I could name some of them. I actually do know and have met. In one case, I was wed at one time to a statue representing, one of these. So my programming, I have altars, and this was not popular when I first wrote my books. People didn't want to talk. As a matter of fact, I knew of a lot of MKULTRAs that denounced this, but the reality of evil in the form of beings ran my altars. In my opinion, you can do whatever you want to a person and split them up and try to program them. But in my opinion, it will not hold unless you bring the entities in. Mm-hmm. That's what makes it work. So there's the hardcore science, and then there's the esoteric occulted side. And those two things go together. And I've had extensive in deep deprogramming, extensive memories of and interactions right there in my room, at night, in waking consciousness. A lot of it's in the astral, which is being worked significantly and has been for a couple of decades now.
Sorry about the motorcycle.
Oh, no worries.
I feel like my friend always says that's the Matrix, like someone's trying to disrupt what you're saying. But go ahead, continue.
Yeah. So, this is a very spiritual issue, and that word has been so diluted. I know, but this is about a long, long, long war between what's right and what isn't right. And there are beings trying to gain entry here in a way they haven't been able to thus far, after trying over and over without us self-destructing. And so from my perspective, it's all coming to the surface in society now. I see it everywhere. And the tech to me can be used, for example, what we're doing now, but people need to be aware what this really is. This is an access point. Smartphones, computers, iPads, the whole bit. And I'll drop one here, which is, my understanding is that the smartphones, the iPhones, have a mini HARP antenna in them. Since 4G, it's not just 5G. It's the same in 4G and 5G, and as they progress. Now, anybody who puts a mini HARP antenna in a piece of technology, that is not created as a convenience. That is created as a weapon. Mm. And there's a lot of accessing going on. People, the story came out, I believe it was containment, which it's true to some degree. We see it, all of us see it, that they're tracking our data. And then they'll respond, with an ad or something. So that's true. But there was a lot of focus on that. And that's not the main thing about those phones. It's what they're sending through it.
So we actually all, I have a really good question about that. So let's hold that. And I have to go back one more because just so if anyone that's transgender in the audience is listening, I believe there are real transgender, and then I believe there's something going on. Does that make sense to you? Not because I don't want, I don't want to offend anyone or make anyone feel like, but I do think even some transgender people I know are like, it's a lot.
Right. Yeah. It's over the top. And what I see and what those of us who are involved from this angle see is, and there's a lot of us that see this, it's not just my opinion. This is part of removing the sacred feminine, because transhumanism is about creating just one deal. And, in our proper evolution, thousands of years down the road, that very well will happen. We will change as far as male, female, and procreation and all that. But this is happening at a time where it's being used as a weapon. And
okay, so yeah.
Just so you know, I agree too. I agree that there's legitimate gay, there's legitimate people who are wanting to be in a different body, but this is being used now. And by the way, there are a lot of people who started transgender who are now coming back and saying it's all wrong. They're not trying to reverse. They're saying, this is a big moneymaker too for them. But when you really understand what transhumanism is, and the idea that to bring something that may be here in 1,000 years, to bring it in now, our consciousness is not able to handle it without, I mean, look at it. Everything is created into a weapon. So, in 1,000 years, in 1,000 years, this may be the case, that it's a natural evolution. I don't know. But for now, what's happening is part of an agenda.
It's very interesting because we're taping this in September and it's going to come out in January, just because I did my podcast forever. October 4th, next week, they're doing a test of all the cell phones in the United States. They are all going to go off in an emergency broadcast. Some I think are supposed to go for a half an hour or something. And I just find that everybody is like, what is that? Like even conspiracy theorists don't have what that is, but I don't have an answer for that. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on October 4th, but going future, what you're talking about too, this good and evil, it's almost like it is like, I don't know enough about the Bible to quote the Bible or say, but it's that good and evil that is supposed to take place, that war that's going on. It's like we're in it now, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And this is going to go on a very, very long time. And it is going to go forward. There's a lot of things that are going to happen because of where we are right now. And I'm not saying that it's all... I'm not a believer in the end of humanity. Mm-hmm. I believe in the evolution of humanity. I have tremendous faith. I'm a novice student of Rudolf Steiner. And I believe he was the gift to mankind in the last century. He brought information that we had been taken away from us, that a lot of the information, we knew a lot of the things long ago, and it has been hidden from us. And basically how I see it is that there is going to be a split in humanity. Mm-hmm. And that's how it is presented by him. I won't go into his details, but what I see, I believe that split has started. And there's no more, as a friend of mine said, there's no more sitting on the fence. You're either on this side or you're on that side. And that is going to increase and grow. That dynamic is going to increase and grow. And as it increases and grows, it's going to become very obvious on the surface, not in some underground facility or basement of a church. It's going to show up here. And those who think it's somebody else's issue or somebody else's problem or someone else will take care of it, it's coming to everybody in one form or another. So in other words, this is the way I see it. When we hold things at bay because they're unpleasant or we don't want to deal with it, you halt your own evolution, and you affect the evolution of all of humanity. It has an effect. When you go through it, yes, you experience fear and despair and horror at times. But what I can say is on the other side, you become incredibly strong. Mm-hmm. You become a part of the solution. That's really the only way to become part of the solution on what we're talking about today, is to face it. And according to Rudolf Steiner, we're in the epic, have been for several hundred years, the epic of, it's called the consciousness soul. And the way that really looks is we have to face evil. We are all now on the path. I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow or, maybe 100 years, 1,000 years. I mean, everybody's going to have the opportunity, but we're all going to face it. It's going to become personal. It's not going to be somebody else's problem. And that's my passion, is that if the more people that develop a true inner life and start facing what's out there, and I'm not talking about just taking in information. We've been doing that with the internet for a long time. I'm talking about processing it, cognitizing it, understanding it, and hopefully finding for yourself what action, what responsibility you have in what the world is and where we're headed. And that's that's going to come to all of us, whether we're ready for it or not. And what happened in the last few years, what came to the surface in society, that to me clearly told me here we are. It's begun. And it's not that it started there. I mean, obviously my life and others' lives prove that it started a long time ago. And it's been in other epochs of human history. Mind control, it just looked different. But it's that was a kickoff to the global agenda that, they want now, they're ready to come for everybody if they can do it. And I'm not saying they're going to succeed in all this. But it takes a lot for each individual to be able to resist it, because they're going to do everything in their power to remove the humanness from human. That's what this is. So, for example, when I mentioned the transgender, it's taking, this is what they do. This is their MO, taking something that on a small scale could be legitimate and turning it into a weapon through the mind. And that's what I see has happened. And like I said, I'm not the only one who sees it. Most of the people I personally know see it too, whether they're, man and woman drawn or woman and woman drawn. I mean, it's everybody in my group of people that I know that can see that they've utilized this as a weapon
to confuse people. Well, I believe that ADHD and all those, I don't want to say they're popular because that makes it sound like I'm diminishing. They're real. And I think that's the phone flashing. That's the get the kid an iPad fast. You know what I mean? That's the programming that's so subtle. Whereas when you were brought in, it wasn't really subtle. It was bang, whereas now it's that, two things, because I had so many questions. You're really engaging. I'm listening to all this. I want to, when we end, sort of give a, hey, this is what you should do, or this is what helps you that we can learn from. Because the only thing, there's this strange, what I'm going to call my people, my spiritual people. I hate the term light workers, but we need a better term, and I'm going to use it for now. The it's all good people. Like I'm not, maybe in the end we'll go, it's all good, but I feel like there is a mix of dark and light that is, it's almost like there's this wonderful, I believe everything he says, this guy Bashar, I listen to him all the time, and he's channeling an alien, and the alien is telling us how to manifest our own reality and how we attract. It's very good, but I always say I'm one of those people that has to dance. I dance on when I say dance on the dark side and dance on the light side, it's like, I want to know about the dark side. I need to read this. I need to know, to say it simply, I need to know who the demons are. I need to know what's going on. I need to know what they're capable of, what God, archangels, all that stuff, which may be even in a religious sense, strange words, but I agree with you completely. I think the it's all good is almost, it's like, I hate to say this, but there are a lot of mediums out there. I take a lot of mediumship classes, and there's a lot of mediums that open their class. There's a institute in California, and they go, first of all, there's no such thing as demons. They don't exist. And I'm always like, I can't, they have great information and they teach great things. And then a friend of mine said, I think they might be getting their information from demons if they're so sure about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the rainbows and unicorns is very, very Luciferic. So that is and may want to put a no comments on this video because you're going to get bombarded.
That's okay. Everybody get ready, and we'll. I'm going to leave it in. I leave everything in, and so we'll just.
The New Age movement is Luciferic. Period. Okay, it is being run by the Luciferic. And here's the deal. You've got Lucifer and a figure called Ahriman. Ahriman would be what people think of as Satan. They are two very different people. This was a point of contention when I started deprogramming or when I was trying to get help, because that wasn't a popular view in what I would call religious Christianity. They were one being, right? There was just one adversary. And I said, no, these are two different beings. So there's the Persian name for Satan is Ahriman, and that's the name that Rudolf Steiner uses. There's Lucifer and Ahriman. Lucifer likes to bring the past into the present to halt evolution. He has a very particular way of looking at it. That's what the New Age is. If you notice, a lot of the practices are old practices that had power when they were in that time. They're being brought forward because they don't carry that power anymore. So it's like that is a completely Luciferic. And I can show you that the New Age movement started with the Lucis Trust. This was a long time ago through Theosophy, which Rudolf Steiner, a lot of people say to me, oh, I know Rudolf Steiner. It's like, if you're reading Theosophy, you don't know Rudolf Steiner. You go to Anthroposophy, then you'll know Rudolf Steiner, because what happened for him was a Christ experience. And once he had that and started speaking it in his lectures, they kicked him out of Theosophy. And that's when he started Anthroposophy, which is a term for human wisdom. So he's very much about mind and heart, but it's very much about taking the information in and processing it in a way that it literally changes you. You start to understand our true cosmology, the true metaphysics. So I can see it. I've had many, many New Age friends over the years, and I can always see this Luciferic energy. And so Lucifer wants to bring the past into the present, and Ahriman wants to bring the future into the present. The Ahrimanic energy is very nihilistic to humanity, just totally nihilistic. Whereas the Luciferic needs, to be brought into balance. Basically, what you have is you have the Luciferic, the Ahrimanic, and the middle path is the Christ impulse. This is the balancing. Everything is out. These guys are completely out of balance. And that's the course we're on right now. We always have the good working with us, but we have a responsibility to help them, the good. So if we're not doing what we need to do, it's disempowering what they can do here on Earth. So that's how I see this unfolding right now before my eyes. I never thought I'd see what I'm seeing. I thought I'd be long gone.
It came fast.
It came fast.
It came really fast. And also, I was
going to say some of the religions can also fall into the Luciferic. Okay. I'm not a religious Christian. I'm what I would call an esoteric Christian, an occulted Christian. And that's what I got through Steiner, was my experiences were showing me something different from religion. And so that Luciferic, it's not just the New Age, although that was the birth of it was through the Luciferic, but also you can see this in a lot of the religions. And in some of them, which I won't name, you've got the Ahrimanic, which is they're Satan worshipers. And this has been brought to light by whistleblowers inside the church, not just, if you ever want to really know what's going on inside the Jesuit, just read a little of Malachi Martin.
Yeah.
He brought a lot of this out. So it's important that we understand what we live in, what our true history is. We all know our history is bogus. Understand our true history and the course that we're headed on. For any of us, me included, you included, for any of us to be effective. How can we be effective if we don't even know what we're up against? That's been my argument, is, keeping it at bay is harming you and your future evolution, not only the whole of humanity, but for you as well. So I'm sorry, I feel like I get on a soapbox every now and then.
No, you know what? That's why, that my motorcycle again. That's why I say, and my listeners know, I let my guests say whatever they want, because if, feel free to send me an email or leave a comment if you're mad, and I will read it and acknowledge. But you're here because I want to hear what you have to say about your experiences. And it's really interesting because I just started reading a little bit about Gnosticism and how, Jesus was everything is backwards. but Jesus was here to give us the information. This is the information you need. Like, does that make sense how I said that?
Sure. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I do. It makes sense. I know a little bit about the Gnostic, and there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful information in there. But I have a very different view of. I have a more Steinerian view of Jesus in Christ. Mm-hmm.
All right. So now I've kept you longer than I even promised. Just tell us, and then we'll plug all your books, and everyone get the book. It is so mind blowing. And you know what? I feel like it's like the Robert Kennedy just wrote a book, and what they said about it is you can open any page and just start reading. You don't even have to read it straight through, and you'll be like, oh my God. And that's how I felt with your book. I felt like just open it anywhere, take in a page, and it'll blow your mind. So what is your, if this is, because I don't want to take you longer than I promised, how do you, is it through prayer? Is it through meditation? How do you keep yourself, shall we say, well, I don't want to say in the light. That's such a weird, or aware. How about that word, aware?
Well, I do use prayer and meditation. I currently spend a lot of time in nature as much as I can. And I encourage people to do that, set the tech down, turn it off, and go out and just sit quietly for a while, but I'm going to be bold and say, I know that what is happening is the goal is to remove that human spirit and soul from humanity. So I would recommend that people think about, what does it mean to you to be human? What is the full-on meaning of being a human being in your thoughts, in your actions? Get a piece of paper out, write these things down. This is what I do, and this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. We all have that. And just so you know, I have good days and I have really down days. Yesterday was a really rough day, and the night before I didn't sleep, and I get down on things, and I get down on myself because I do face it. I'm involved in it, on radio and, with my friends. And some days it's overwhelming, I admit, but then there's always another day, and I wake up the next day and the sun's up and there's all kinds of possibilities. Mm-hmm. Build, if you don't already have a significant inner life, that will be the saving grace for everyone. That will be the thing that if you develop a true inner life, you will be able to discern things. You will see things happening in the environment around you, and you'll recognize what it really is. Or you may even just think something's wrong with this. And then something's right over here, And so developing that ability to discern, it does come from taking in knowledge, but I think of it as a mind-heart connection. It's not just about taking in. We can become voyeurs too, with a lot of this information, but to process it in a way that it changes you. And for me, that's what anthroposophy is doing. It's a living, breathing thing. It's not a religion. It's loaded with information about our true history, our present situation, and our future. But it's about true human wisdom. And that's not necessarily for everybody. I'm not telling everybody to go read that. But that inner life and remaining human is going to get harder and harder and harder as time goes forward. They're on an accelerated scale as far as I see.
Yeah.
So, but I have tremendous faith. I know where I'm headed. No matter what goes down around me, I know where I'm headed. And that's what I mean by a true inner life. That's what it gives you, is a security, and your emotions may go up and down. I mean, we're up on some crazy times. We're seeing some crazy stuff,
Yeah.
None of us are immune to that. But there's a way to stay connected despite what you might have to face in the world.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yes. And we didn't even get to the shooters, which I think are all programmed.
They are. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much. It took us forever to line this up, but we did it.
We did it. Yay. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for your work, Karen. I really appreciate you bringing these things out.
Well, thank you. Tell everyone where they can get the book, where they can see the 50 voices, and I'll also have it in the show notes.
Okay. 50voices.org. I believe that's the address.
I'll double check it. Yeah.
Abuse in there, but I think it's 50voices.org, or it might be 50voicesritualabuse.org, one of the two. And then the book is I got a publisher this time. The first books were self-published. There's a publisher this time. And I do really ask people to support them by buying directly from them. It's logosophiabooks.com. .org.
I'll find it, and the books smell great. That's all I was saying.
They smell great, but they're really sweet. They're doing some amazing work, and they're a very small time, and it would really help them out. And I get more from the book that way too. There are other sources where you can get it, but we both get a little bit more of the money that comes in. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. I guess we'll see you next week. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Elisa, and everybody have a great day.
Paranormal Karen, she's a spooky kind of queen.